and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'll be discussing the 2005 horror thriller movie and sequel, Saw 2, as directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, taking over the directorial mantle from James Wan, who directed the first movie in the series, 2004's Saw. So, as per my review for Saw, I will issue the same disclaimer. What I would say is that if you haven't watched Saw 2 specifically, or to be honest, any other movie in the franchise, I wouldn't watch this review. Now, I'm going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible for this specific movie, but by insinuation, I may end up giving something away for the series as a whole. And this is kind of a film and that you need to watch it first off without knowing what's going to happen. Indeed, the same can be said for all of the other films in the series. So, if this does apply to you, switch off now. But please do come back to SciFirst MovieTalk and let me know what you thought of the film. I would be very interested to know, as I always am. So, okay, are we ready? In this movie, we actually follow the work of the notorious serial killer John Kramer, aka Jigsaw, as played by Tobin Bell, in closer detail, actually meeting the man behind the traps and exploring some of the motivations for doing what he does, the origin of his ideology, and getting to learn just how sure he is that his methods work. Jigsaw kind of goads new kid on the block, sorry, I kind of had to, Detective Matthews, as played by Donnie Wahlberg, and does this into playing his new and sinister game, in exchange for the life of his son, Daniel Matthews, as played by Erik Knudsen, who has been captured and placed in a house of horrors with several other people, each having no recollection of how they got there, nor why they have been taken. The rules are simple for Detective Matthews. He must simply sit and listen to Jigsaw to save his son, who, along with the other abductees, have only 2 hours to live after breathing in nerve toxin, which is being pumped throughout the house. The victims find themselves in the ultimate house of gore, with macabre and gruesome traps set for each of them, unique to their own particular traits and misdeeds. The price of survival? Their flesh. The prize? The antidote, their life. So, following the success of the original Saw movie, it just absolutely screamed sequel. And as a consequence, Lionsgate Films, who produced and released Saw, didn't even bat an eyelid to greenlight the sequel. It was in the bag, so to speak, and ultimately, although the film itself did get mixed reviews, it was itself an instant hit and a box office success, further kind of cementing Jigsaw as one of the most delectable villains outside of Hannibal Lecter, and the Saw franchise as a whole as a spine-chilling and morbidly gruesome series for which it has become known. With Jigsaw's now iconic catchphrase, "I want to play a game," already becoming synonymous and instantly recognisable as being the essence of the franchise. This movie is noticeably much more brutal and graphic than its predecessor, right from the very start, raising the stakes for Jigsaw's victims and us, as the viewer, with more of an in-depth analysis of the traps, and we witness the excruciating pain experienced as each undergo the hellish games set before them. However, for all of this, the movie feels somewhat lacking when compared to the original. You know, of course, it was always going to have a hard time to compete against such a phenomenal movie, both in terms of overall plot and content, and of course, the twist everybody was expecting to happen the second time around. So there was a lot of pressure on this movie to deliver. This movie, for the most part, does have some very interesting ideas, but it does try too hard, if I'm honest, to kind of throw us off the scent this time around. And it's quite slow overall to really provide us with any decent content. There's lots of talking and some more talking. There's certainly lots of irritating screaming. Okay, so I'm not saying it's misplaced. You know, people are in being tortured, screaming. Yeah, sounds about right. But it's nearly every time somebody or something moves do we have a screaming chorus. I think it actually says volumes to the rest of the characters in this movie when you're actually rooting for Jigsaw, which you do find yourself doing and not really caring too much about what actually happens to the others. They are pretty much in this movie cannon fodder. But that's not too surprising. Tobin Bell plays the role of Jigsaw excellently, especially given that his role in the original was minimal. In this movie, he is the focus, and with Jigsaw planting himself right front and centre once again. The difference being, this time around, we of course know who he is, with the film kind of playing on that fact. The film also deviates significantly from the investigative nature of the first film, leaning towards more of the style of the movie the series would become in later installments, kind of concentrating on the kills and the traps themselves rather than kind of investing in any one particular character. Of course, besides Jigsaw, you know, to kind of any great extent. There's less of that kind of intricate detail that featured in the original, and less of the kind of tense build-up that was such a prominent feature of that movie. I would also say that the rationale for the victims being tested is quite weak and not wholly explored. This kind of does leave you less involved and less invested in them than perhaps we were previously. Most of the characters portrayed in this movie are the kind of the usual Jigsaw selection pack that's going to become no brains and a real kind of attitude problem. Lots of screaming, standing around, running around in circles, and everybody kind of out for themselves. But even though this entry is nowhere near as good as the first, I still enjoy it. It's still got some fairly decent shock value, and is certainly full of that kind of morbid curiosity with plenty of squeamish moments. The traps are good for the most part, for those that we actually get to see anyway. They're quite ingenious, but relatively simple in this entry, all told. And it does have a couple of decent twists and turns along the way, if albeit not all are fully explored, to be honest. Overall, this was a decent sequel to the original Saw movie, all told. Nowhere near as intricate in its details, though, and with a distinct shift towards more gore. You know, those elements, of course, that the series would become associated with as it moves forward. It does, however, still have plenty of appeal. Most certainly, for the most part, down to Tobin Bell's portrayal of Jigsaw, which is devilishly exquisite. And the standout standout highlight of the film by absolute miles. Whilst the rest of the cast are pretty much forgettable and very dispensable, it still delivers a reasonable thrill ride for the viewer, all told. You can see the framework being laid for the future sequels in this movie, and a whole foundation for the world and the motivations of Jigsaw as a killer. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk. We would definitely love to have you back. But most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.